So we are live. We were just talking Blue Jays. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just saying that it's hilarious how 1 week ago the Blue Jays were one game away from the World Series, and now the general manager, who was the chief architect, is gone, and now the city of Toronto is sort of like in mourning because of everything that has happened over the last week, and now all they have to watch really is the Raptors and the Maple Leafs. And right now the Maple Leafs have lost 7 of their first 8 games. So it's not exactly going to be pleasant for the city of Toronto for the next few months.
Yeah, no, it's for sure.
It's such a fine line too between, the last time I was on, or second to last, Dan was talking about, the great Blue Jays team, and I saw it as a very good team with a chance to win, but it's so hard to win. Like, they weren't the perfect team, and now when you look at this team moving forward, I mean, obviously they have core players that are going to leave them competitive for a very long time, but they got to change the rotation again, and Price will be gone, and
Well,
uh, and
it,
go ahead.
it's funny, Kevin, because apparently Mark Shapiro, who's coming in as the team president, there have been reports that he wasn't too happy with the fact that Alex Anthopoulos emptied the coffers to make the deals for Price and for Tulowitzki, because Shapiro, for a long time in Cleveland, has been a guy who likes to build through the organization and build with his own players. It makes his task going forward even more difficult. And from what I heard yesterday, Anthopoulos pretty much knew that he was a goner halfway through the season, so him and Paul Beeston essentially said, let's go for it, what the hell. They did. They got to Game 6 of the ALCS. But now if you go forward, David Price is not going to re-sign there. Marco Estrada, who's a average pitcher who had a good year, is going to cost him $15 million. And you've got Jose Bautista and Edwin Encarnacion 1 year away from free agency. To me, I think they're going to go back down to that middle-of-the-road team next year unless they spend a ton of money. So, I mean, it was a short term, and I said this when they made the Price deal and the Tulowitzki deal. It was a short term, go for it type of thing, and that's all fine and good. But now, who knows if it's going to be another 22 years before they win another AL East title. So, we'll see.
Yeah.
And that's the happy look at things from Mike Agello.
Sorry.
Yeah, my costume, Yeti Perrant. Just, come on, this is, that's it. I'm going to take this off now because...
Yeah, I'm sure it's difficult breathing.
It's not fun. I'll tell you that. It's not fun. All right. Plus, you're really committing to it by wearing the full bodysuit that I'm wearing, which I really don't need to because obviously I've got my hair stuck in my. There we go. But yeah, this is a little bit more hair than Bernie actually has. I feel like really honored to actually have this kind of chest hair. Whew,
It's a very Italian thing, actually.
Yeah, and this is a big day coming up, because this was pre lost season rural reformation time, but there's always the talk that that wherever a team is at, I know Bob McKenzie just did a piece about after 4 weeks where you are is essentially where you are in the NHL standings, and that certainly, we did a piece, this was prior to the parity league that we now have, so it was years ago, but we took it and we said it was Halloween, and we kind of showed back then that if you weren't in a playoff spot by Halloween, the odds were against you. I mean, it wasn't impossible, obviously, but the odds were against you to making the playoffs. So it's been less like that since parity has taken over, but bad starts make it difficult.
Well, last year, and we're getting the echo again. Last year, I know that the only team that was not in a playoff spot at American Thanksgiving that didn't make the playoffs was the Toronto Maple Leafs. Every other one that was in a postseason position at American Thanksgiving made the playoffs. So. Yeah, I mean, and the American Thanksgiving we've heard for the last few years, Kevin, that's sort of the line of demarcation when GMs start to look at their teams and say, okay, we'll start to make some deals. But it seems that might have moved up a little bit because some teams got off to such bad starts.
Yeah, It's still hard, so hard to make deals now. I mean, the cap, it used to be almost a cliche when GMs would say, well, the cap makes it hard. But, I've had GMs just tell me in the last couple of weeks that it's the budget considerations. Like every time they try to talk trade with someone, the guy said, yeah, but, we're right at our budget. So it makes it difficult because the money's got to be almost even in most cases.
And people don't seem to factor that in. They factor in the cap room and not the budget, and that's why the move that was made, and not to make this Leaf centric here, but the move that was made this week was very peculiar, where the Leafs made a call up and a send down, and then activated Nathan Horton's contract into long-term injury. They opened up $5.2 million in cap space. And knowing that organization and the money that's behind that organization, they're going to use that cap space. I think they're going to go out before the deadline and maybe even pretty soon and make a deal where they take on salary, and it might not be somebody that helps them, but take on salary to alleviate another team of their budget problem or salary cap problem for a young asset or for a draft pick. And that's what the Leafs can do because they have boatloads of money.
Yeah, I agree.
They're in that boat. I agree. Wearing the official Hockey Buzz sweatshirt, by the way, which is not available anymore. But yes, this was the 2015 Hockey Buzz sweatshirt. So anyway, there you go. All right, so let's get started here. Ready?
Yep.
Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, October 30th, 2015.
For Eklund to get the date right when it's the day before Halloween.
Yeah, that's when when you've been trying to make costumes for the last week. Yeah. In my costume creation, I had a disastrous effect. Yesterday, I talked about the BB-8 costume that I was making, and everything looked fine. And then, of course, well, here's BB. This is just to refresh people. It's great to have Kevin back, which is awesome. Thank you, Kevin, for jumping back on.
My pleasure.
But here's the BB-8 costume that I was making. So this is this is my garage. So this is R2D2 and BB-8. So this ball down here, this is all made out of plaster Paris and like aluminum and lining and all kinds of things I put in there. Human DNA, whatever I could put in there to make it stronger. And but then of course it collapsed last night into a heap. Fortunately, without my son in it, so it was, which is good. So yeah, it was failure's always an option when you go big. So that's what we always say around here. So that's a we're still working on it though. We still have hope for. We missed the parade for the elementary school, but I thought the BB-8 would be difficult to maneuver through the elementary school anyway. So, but we're still, the neighborhood parade is the neighborhood Halloween tomorrow night. We're still have hope. I'm still up there with my plaster and putting together my droid. But Star
Did you
Wars.
have a plan B already in place, or?
Oh yeah, you have to always have a plan B. Yeah, there's always a plan B when I'm working on something like this because I know. I mean, although I will not. I mean, I will definitely get it done. I will work round the clock to get it done. It's if I fail in its structural integrity. Yeah, you gotta have a plan B. So we had another costume in place already.
Yeah, plan B for costumes with my kids growing up, and even going back to the early days when I was a kid, were always athletic uniforms.
Right.
Plan B was always strap on the football gear or the hockey gear. And get out there and do your thing.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, last year, but my son, of course, is very different, not an athlete. Last year, 2 years ago, Plan B was he went as Jim Henson and basically had a big Muppet on his hand, and a flannel shirt and a beard and a fake beard. But yeah, the athletic. I was surprised. Usually, in general, this is our last Halloween elementary school parade, which is sad because these are always fun to go to. And over the last several years, the elementary school parade has definitely turned into a princess / pirate / superhero event, right? Like this is what you need to do. So, and princesses last year because Frozen was big. Princesses were everywhere. Princesses are gone now, and because now you have like the movie, the new TV show Supergirl. So many of the girls are going off into superheroes, which is really cool. So less princesses, more superheroes.
Here's what I can tell you though is that as a product of the golden age of comic book collecting, basically my love of reading was developed with Marvel comic books and DC. when I was a kid, nobody read Supergirl.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, nobody read Supergirl. There was
yeah.
a local party store that would take the 12-cent comics, buy them back from you for 2 for a nickel, and then sell them for a nickel. And when you were leafing through them, but there were always 50 Supergirl comics that nobody would read.
Well, yeah. Well, then again, there weren't that many girls reading comic books when we were kids.
That is correct, and most of us at that age who were reading them were not of the age where Supergirl was.
Right. And and the boys reading them weren't the ones that could get the girls either. So there's that side of things too. So
I have to say that I have a genuine lack of inventiveness when it comes to Halloween costumes. I basically go back and default to one particular costume. And before I grew the beard and the goatee, I was the John Belushi Blutarsky character from the movie Animal House. I had the T-shirt. The T-shirt that said college. I had the flannel shirt and the shorts with the white socks, and carried around a empty Jack Daniels bottle that was filled with Coca-Cola, and then would guzzle the Jack Daniels bottle like Belushi did in the movie. I did that for like 5 years in a row. And I'm like, wait a second, you were the same guy last year. I'm like, yeah, because I don't have to buy a costume. It's
I absolutely see that.
Now nobody would know who that movie is, what that movie is about. That movie has lost its relevance. So
that has. So,
but before we launch into our subject matter for hockey, I wanted to make this observation. I've been in the Carolinas, as they like to say.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a wedding last weekend. My cousin was married, actually right on the Atlantic Ocean, 40 yards from the ocean. And I went to that wedding and then stopped to see my daughter in South Carolina on the way home. And the reason I bring that up is that it just occurred to me as I was sequestered in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I was working from there as well. My wife and daughter were working on some home improvement in my daughter's house, and I had to work and cover hockey. But I was struck by, this is what struck me. Even there, I was able to watch hockey. And Fox regional telecast of the Carolina Hurricanes was on, and I realized every goal is now available somewhere online. Not just every score in every game, but every goal.
Yep.
And every big play.
Every hit.
It's just remarkable, and I started to think about how far hockey has come in the United States, where there are obviously no teams in South Carolina, and I doubt within the city of Spartanburg that there were only but a handful of hockey fans.
Right.
But I was certainly able to cover the sport from there.
And within 5 minutes of the goal being scored, the video is posted on NHL.com. You can look at the box score.
Yeah.
And the video link is right there. So, yeah, I mean...
No, it's such an interesting world from where we were, from trying to not even be able to watch your home team play when I was a kid, you couldn't even see that. I remember trying to watch the Flyers play at home on WOR out of New York, which was Channel 9, and trying my best to tune it in, and just be so fuzzy, and thinking that there's nothing worse than a white fuzzy TV trying to watch hockey on a white background. You're like, I think I see a guy moving through the picture.
Yeah. Well, and I've told this story before, but it bears repeating, just my experience as a kid going to Olympia Stadium in Detroit and making sure that you got to the game 45 minutes early so you could get in line at the concession stand to buy the hockey news.
Yeah.
Even though I was in a very much a hockey city where the team was covered pretty extensively in the local newspapers, if you wanted to know about the league, you had to buy the hockey news because it would be sold out by the start of the game, without a doubt. And there was only one other place in the area, a little Professor bookstore is what it was called, where if you could had to go to Dearborn, and I lived in Wayne, which was 20 miles away, in order to get the hockey news. But that was the only way to cover it. Even when I got my first job out of college in Arizona, with access to the Associated Press, it was difficult to know what was going on in the league. I mean, you basically got scores and scoring for some reason. That was it. There was no coverage of the local team. So
I bet there was somebody who drove the hockey news from Toronto to Detroit for those games. Like I bet there that have a big truck, a big car full of hockey newses that he took down.
Yeah, I've often wondered. I tried to think, because it was available at every concession stand, and there were usually a stack of them, so 25 or 50. So, how many concession stands? I don't know, 10, 12. So
somebody brought a big car full of hockey music down.
I know in the 80s and the 90s it started to get printed in Buffalo. I know that there were mailing addresses for subscriptions that were Buffalo addresses. So I know that I believe it did get printed in the U.S. in Buffalo. But it's funny because what you bring up there in terms of like watching games or listening to games on radio. I mean, being a Leaf fan in Buffalo, you think it would be easy, but I had a black and white TV in my parents' house that I'd have to move all over the house to get the reception because the Leaf games were either on CBLT in Toronto, the CBC outlet, or CHCH in Hamilton, and depending on the weather or the wind or whatever, it was tough to get those games in on different nights. So I had to take this portable black and white TV and move all over the house and find the place where I could watch it because the reception was bad.
Oh yeah, no, that's the truth.
Even now, the ability to not have a Sirius radio, to be in your car, to take your phone out and find whatever game you want on the radio.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Through your phone, to me, it's just remarkable. My wife and I, this was a driving trip for us, and I wanted to listen to a couple of games, and I simply, hauled out her iPhone, and
that's it. That's all you got to do.
And I just chose there because her phone was a little better than mine,
and all this changed really quickly. Like all this changed because in 1991, I was in France for 6 months, and while I was in France, the only way I could get anything about hockey, because I was in a hockey pool back home, the only way I could follow my hockey pool at all was the USA Today. In 1991, and that was the only hope I had, and only because I was working in France and I was helping some people build some homes for underprivileged people, and the only time we had off was on Sundays, so I would go into Marseille, the town, and find a USA Today on Sundays, and that's how I would. Probably...
Yeah, it is interesting because I would tell you another story. I'm trying to think. It was in the early '90s, and I wish I could remember who I was trying to reach. I was trying to reach someone in Russia, and I called and I got someone who spoke English, and I said to the guy, my name is Kevin Allen of USA Today, and the guy said, Kevin Allen of USA Today? I said, yes, and he said, you're very famous here, and I said, I doubt that, and he says, no, very famous, and basically, he told me the story of what you said. The only way to cover that they could cover what was going on in the NHL was through, the international papers, and we were delivered, to Moscow, and we were in the hotels, and that's how, the real hardcore fans followed. The same thing when I went to Japan for the first time. There was a line, and by a line I mean 7 or 8 people who were in the press box who came up to get my autograph because their only knowledge of the NHL was reading it off of USA Today.
That's awesome.
I mean, it was before, obviously the internet had not made the impact that it has now.
Wow, that's awesome. And it's so funny because it all did change by like 1997. It was already changed. Like by that point you could already. So that's how quickly it all happened. I mean, from going to nothing, being able to get no information at all, to being able to get tons of information now, and not like we have today, but it was a ton of information relative to what we had before.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gone from that, and anything that happened on a Tuesday night in LA wouldn't be known to my readers until Thursday.
Yeah.
And we've gone to that to if a guy sneezes, if Yager sneezes, it gets reported in the Czech Republic 5 minutes later.
Right. Yeah. No, it's insane. It's really good. It's really, we're very lucky. And then of course to think that just 10 years after that, we'd be able to do this. Like have have our own podcast. And be able to broadcast it to the world. It's just crazy. So,
well, it's
we have people in France who watch us now, and I always think about that when I get like an email from somebody in France. I'm like, geez, when I was in France, if I could have watched a daily news show on hockey, I would have been absolutely never missing it. Like there would have been not a chance that I could have missed it. So anyway, let's get going here. We already did the date.
By the way, if this existed when I was in college, I'd have never gotten to class. I had a hard enough time.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's.
I agree. We already started on the show, so we already did our introductions. I wanted to get into the thing I posted today, which is just, and this is something like Kevin and I spoke a little bit ago, and I was doing some, and this actually happened between the time we spoke, Kevin. But I got a call that we've all been hearing that the Ducks are going to do something, and that there's going to be an issue. Boudreau's name keeps coming up as an obvious possibility, and I think that is very possible. But today I talked to somebody, and Frederik Andersen's name came up again as a possibility of moving out. It's a little surprising based on. I don't think this whole Ducks slide has anything to do with him because watching the Ducks are scoring 1 goal a game, literally 1 goal a game, and you can't score 10 goals in 10 games and be okay, and blame your goalie. But last night he did again. Someone pointed out to me, give up another kind of like heartbreaking type goal for them. And that's it's not that he's been terrible, but. So I thought to myself, who could they be talking about, with Frederik Andersen? And the only hint I was given was sort of to look at the Atlantic Division, and the only team in the Atlantic Division to me that makes sense, this is just me speculating from there, is the Buffalo Sabres with Frederik Andersen. And could there be something to that? What do you think is going to happen in Anaheim, Kev?
Well, my take on it, having talked to some people there, is that they certainly don't want to fire Bruce Boudreau. That's not the way they're leaning. On the other hand, it's a possibility because historically we know that's what happens in these situations. And second, these things become self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
That's what happened in Columbus. Nobody thought that Todd Richards was in trouble when it first started, but sooner or later, as the losses started to mount, the players started to, I think, get anxiety over what was happening, and they started to, self-doubt creeps in. They start to worry. 1 goal begets more goals, and suddenly you've got a crisis on your hands. And the only way to stop the bleeding is to bring a coach, because what happens when you get a new coach? Clean slate. All the players are on their best defensive behavior because they're trying to earn playing time.
Yeah.
And so these kind of things work to stop the bleeding, and everybody sort of understands that. Well, I think where we are in Anaheim, I think Bob Murray really knows that the players that are blamed for this, to me, bad luck has played a big role, and I base that on, and gosh, I'm going to sound like an advanced stat guy when I say this, but their shooting percentage is so low that it's just ridiculous. It's so low that you can realize they've just had bad luck.
Right.
Last time I looked, it was like 2 and 3%, where that's not going to happen, and that Getzlaf and Perry didn't forget how to score goals. So I don't think this is systemic. I don't think this is Bruce Boudreau, but do I think he's safe? No, I don't. Now with regard to Andersen. That would surprise me if they would do that because Bob Murray said, and I think you were there when this happened. Bob Murray said, when he got Goodobin was, we don't want to go through what we did last year when we didn't have enough goalies. So for him to ship out, his main guy, I don't know. I don't see him doing that, but it would make sense, I guess, from Buffalo's perspective. So.
And this is the only flaw in that potential trade is the fact that I don't think Buffalo is in a position to give up significant assets for a goaltender when, even though Leonard's hurt and he's going to be hurt out for a couple months, Tim Murray traded a first-round pick for him. He knows him from Ottawa. I think he wants to give him a legitimate shot at being the number 1 goaltender. And this team is not is not a team that is playoff or bust this year. You got a first-year head coach in Dan Bylsma. Tim Murray is safe. They don't need to make the playoffs. They just need to be competitive and be entertaining after a couple years of being really bad. So the impetus is not there for Tim Murray to bring in that goaltender. I mean, it's not exactly the greatest thing to have Chad Johnson and Linus Olmark as your goaltending tandem right now. But
Right.
I don't think they're not going to give up a good top prospect for a good goaltender in Frederik Andersen.
Well, what is Frederik Andersen's value? And it's got me thinking about this. Like, what is Frederik Andersen really? Like, right now he's
a
he
goaltender.
had a good year last year, but he's a very cheap goalie. He's still like $1.25 million goalie. Like this is his last year. He's a UFA next year.
Well, I don't think it's high. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think you'd get a lot for him. But I would say this: I like Anderson better than I like Leonard.
Yeah.
But I'm in the minority, and I mostly let me rephrase that. I completely agree with what Mike said. I don't think that it makes.
Yeah.
I don't think that Murray would, given his history with Leonard and the fact he gave a first-round pick, that probably makes more sense. But for me, if I was Buffalo, I would love to give Anderson, in my lineup.
Yeah, I mean, because this is going to be. I mean, he's only a one-year guy. You're picking up for 1 year. He's a UFA after this year. Leonard's out for, like you said, 2 maybe more months than that. So the Sabres are looking at, and without a goalie, and even with a goalie, is it such a terrible thing to have Leonard and Anderson as your 2 goalies? I mean, it's not. You're looking at you're not paying a ton of money for that combo, and you're getting 2 pretty good goalies. You have a legitimate 2 goalie system that's half decent.
For Anderson's an RFA, so they would have to bridge deal him, and based on the fact that he went to the conference final and played pretty well last year, you're acquiring somebody that you're probably going to have to sign for, I would say, probably $3.5 million on a couple-year deal if you're going to keep him in the short term. And they have Leonard under control, I think, for another couple years at less than that. And like I said, I think Murray wants to give him a legitimate shot at being the number 1 goaltender. I mean, with Buffalo, it's all short term. It's okay. We have Chad Johnson. He's a backup goaltender. He's had some good games. He's had some bad games, but his presence in the lineup sort of is costing Buffalo points. But I don't think they went into this season thinking with the mindset that they were a legitimate playoff contender. They were just trying to be better than they were last year. As for Anaheim, yeah, I mean, if their mindset is we need to make a trade before we fire Boudreau, something to shake things up, then trading Anderson and calling up Gibson makes a bit of sense. But to me, from an outside looking in, it looks more complicated than that. And the thing is, I don't think firing Boudreau and hiring Paul McLean or hiring Trent Ianni really does anything to change anything in Anaheim. I think the only way they change things is to bring an external candidate in, and I keep going back to Randy Carlyle. I know he's been there before, but I think that would be a dramatic change and would sort of be that change situation that might give a reboot or a restart to that team. But I don't think they're going to do that because of the compensation situation.
It sounds like if they do move Boudreau out, that they'll at least the person I talked to said they'll stay within.
Right.
That they won't go. That they won't, because they feel like they have some good candidates within their organization. So I don't know. I mean, but I also don't think they want to fire Boudreau, and I think that,
I mean, the start of all this is, why would they want to trade Anderson?
Yeah.
I don't see that that's the problem. I mean, it's the lack of goals is clearly the problem.
That is the problem. Yeah, no question about it. We've talked about before, the way you change your culture. Sometimes you change the goalie or you change the coach.
Well, that is true, but Murray doesn't strike me as that type. I'm not speaking of Bob Murray now.
Yeah.
He just doesn't strike me as that type of guy.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk. I'm going to kind of carry a couple things together here. I want to talk scary players because it is Halloween. So, and Russ Cohen on our show last week brought up a really interesting question, and he's not here today, unfortunately. But I wanted to tie this into. He sort of said, "Is it possible right now that Vladimir Tarasenko is the best player in the world?" It's a tough one to sit there. And I could also make an argument that Jamie Benn is the best player in the world right now, but
I think it's Carey Price.
You think it's Carey Price? Okay, so he's a goalie, so we got to count. We're not going to count him.
And you can see the difference.
Yeah.
When Carey Price plays average, like he's done the last 2 games in Vancouver and in Edmonton, where Montreal blew a 3-0 lead last night, as compared to the way he played in the first 9 games, how that team goes from a team that wins 9 in a row to a team that loses 2 in a row. Again, that team is wholly dependent on Carey Price to win, and that's why I say that team needs to be better in front of him before the trade deadline, because he can't be on every single night.
Yeah, but he can be on enough nights that they can finish first overall. I mean, they might not win every night, but they're going to win 10 out of 12 games here. So I mean, he is. I do think he is the best. He is the most valuable player in the league right now, no questions asked. Right? I mean, he's the MVP. I think.
Tarasenko, I mean, it's a great. That's a fun thing. The real answer and the true answer is it basically changes week to week.
Right.
It's a parity league. But if you had to pick one, I think Tarasenko's in the conversation because of his dynamic ability and game-breaking ability. If we're drafting, the way to look at it is if we're drafting players and restarting the NHL,
right?
How high would Tarasenko go? I think Carey Price goes 1. Does Tarasenko go before Sidney Crosby because of what has gone on with Sid the start of this season? Would he go ahead of John Tavares, Ben,
or Jonathan Taves,
Jonathan Taves? Like I would say Taves might go 2 because of the intangibles.
Because of the intangibles, yeah. Ovechkin, though, I mean, there's
Ovechkin. Yeah, I mean, I mean that's a real good point. I mean, I didn't even consider Ovechkin.
Which is crazy.
Is Tarasenko really more dangerous than Ovechkin? I mean, Ovechkin has had in 10 NHL seasons at a time when last year we only had 15 30-goal scorers.
Yeah.
It's so hard to score a goal now, and Ovechkin has 6 50-goal seasons in 10 NHL seasons.
It is very possible. I talked to somebody else the other day. It is very possible that Alex Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer of all time, and we don't even think about it. Given what he's doing above the norm, like you said.
Yeah, I would say I'd still put Mario as the greatest goal scorer I saw, just because he was so dynamic when he would get the puck, and he was so money on a breakaway. Like I still feel like the goalie has an advantage against Ovechkin on a breakaway.
Right.
And I always felt Lemieux had the advantage.
Yeah.
On a breakaway. So I don't know. I would take Lemieux, but I think your point is well taken. I think we don't, because we look for reasons to find flaws in Ovechkin. We don't appreciate what he's really accomplished. But I love the Tarasenko question, and I think it's not an easy one to answer.
Because he just continues to amaze, and he continues to seem to be just getting better.
Well, there was a little bit of a scare yesterday, actually, regarding Tarasenko getting hurt, and I think it was in the second period of that game, and then came back. But I like what Kevin said in terms of it changing from week to week. If you would have asked me last week, when Jonathan Taves scores 2 overtime goals in the first minute in 0-0 games,
yeah,
he basically earned his team 4 points in the standings, and every point in that division is going to count when 6 teams in that division are at the top 6 of the Western Conference. I mean, and he's taking that team on his back with Duncan Keith on the IR. So, yeah, I mean, it can change from game to game. There's so many good players in this team.
Yeah, and the thing about Taves is, for those who love the old war movies, what Jonathan Taves is that sergeant that's in the combat situation that before the battle begins, he walks around and he puts his hand on all of his guy's shoulder. He asks, you got enough ammo? Everybody all set? He tells the guy to button up his coat to make sure he's got dry socks. That's Jonathan Taves away from scoring big goals and everything else. So the intangibles of Taves, like if you're trying to build a team, you want him in that room, imparting wisdom and knowledge. I mean, that's the thing that I keep saying about the Blackhawks, that I've never seen a team like them, that their skill is they understand the art of winning.
Yeah.
And nobody understands it better than Taves. He understands what it takes. He doesn't have panic. He's been there. He's seen it all. He can do it himself, or he can explain what needs to be done to be successful. So he's in that mix as well.
I think they're the scariest team still, Chicago.
Yeah. Although they've been eroded, there's been some erosion of their.
Right, and I think because what was interesting is I heard Alison Maggie, who used to work with Hockey Buzz and now works on XM. He was talking today, and he said the one thing they were talking to him about the Brendan Saad trade, and they said, well, what are your thoughts on that? And he thought, well, I think they actually got good value for Brendan Saad. I thought he said I was kind of impressed because he wasn't going to sign back here again, and he said, but if you ask have we missed Brendan Saad, we're not going to know that until the semifinals. That's what he said, which I thought was pretty much true. Like he said that's when Brendan Saad really mattered to the Hawks, that he was so. And he said, what we don't know is, what, guys like Panarin are going to be like in the semifinals of the Stanley Cup. They're looking very good right now, but will they be able to hold that up? And, without Saad and Sharp, who was another huge part of their playoff runs, those are two big, matzo balls, as they say.
It's beneficial in a way. I mean, you never want to see a key player like Keith being hurt. But it's beneficial in a way that it happened early enough in the season. And right now, that Quenneville, I mean, the one game, I don't know if it was against Tampa Bay or the other, it was against Anaheim. He played Trevor Van Riemsdyk over 22 minutes. He played Svedberg, the rookie defenseman, almost 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yarmulson and Seabrook played over 25 minutes. So he's giving those young guys, who he's got to find out whether he can depend on them or not. He's giving them the ice time now, sort of as a proving ground. Okay, if you can handle this, maybe you can handle it later in the season, and maybe you can handle it in the playoffs. And ironically, he's not giving Trevor Daley any more extra minutes. He's not giving David Rundblad extra minutes because he knows they can't handle it. So it's an interesting way that Quenneville's approaching things.
Well, and what's fascinating is, and I brought this up before, the Quenneville in getting Daley is getting a player who had a great offensive season, but the advanced stat people did not love Daley because the team did not perform well when he was on the ice. Like, you compared his numbers to a guy like Goligoski, for example, who never gets much love from the fan base for being an effective player, but his advanced stats said when he was on the ice, the team performed pretty well. But for Daley having such good offensive numbers, they didn't. And a lot of GMs said, Quenneville's not going to love Daley the way that he loved Oduya. Because, even though he puts up numbers, it's at a price. It's at a price on the defensive end. But going back to where we were talking before about, making decisions on players and stuff, it cuts both ways. Like on the Brandon Saad trade, for example, like there's two ways of viewing it. You can say, well, look, nobody knows a player like the team that has him. They know all of his strengths and weaknesses and flaws, and they get his value and so forth. But it also goes the other way. Like, I think there's two. You love your players too much, and I think the NHL has always been guilty of that. And you compare that to the NFL, where they got a little more killer in them. Their ability to just say, hey, John Smith has served us well for 5 years, and he's got 15 sacks, but he wants $30 million by John Smith. They just move him out, and they expect the fan base to kind of understand that. And in the NHL, the tendency is they sign those guys.
I have a theory behind why this is, Kevin. I've always thought about this. I totally agree.
And I think the Saad move was an NFL move.
It was. It was completely.
They just thought, for the price we got to pay, we'll get other guys that can do that and do it at less money.
As was the Dougie Hamilton move. I mean, basically, did Boston want to pay Dougie Hamilton $6 million a year for 6 or 7 years if they didn't think? He was the one who didn't want to stay in Boston, supposedly. But did Boston feel comfortable investing that much money in a player who had some imperfections in his game? Apparently not, because they traded him, and right now it's early on. In Calgary, he hasn't played very well, and I think he's leading the team in negative plus minus. I'm not saying he's not going to turn it around, because I think he's a really good defenseman, but that was a contributing factor to the reasons why they traded him.
Yeah, but here's the deal about the Hamilton trade that it's sort of now getting lost. The criticism of the Hamilton trade was never whether they should or shouldn't have traded Hamilton.
Yeah.
The criticism was what they got in return.
Right.
The criticism is if you're going to trade a Doug Hamilton, you got to get somebody who can help you now.
Right.
He's a young defenseman who was already playing. You got to get someone back who can help you now. There's nobody on the Bruins right now that came back in that trade, and that's the beef. Like if they wanted to trade him, Brandon Saad got traded, but Nisimov came back, and everybody thought Dano was going to play, as well. Patrick Sharp got traded, but they got back guys that are in the lineup. And Boston, hey, it's nice they got some good young players, but we all know that historically the odds are against younger players coming in and having impact. So
right,
you got to get someone that has a proven track record.
No, that's exactly it. Well, my theory on this has always been that hockey, what I love about the sport and why this is the sport that I have always just been drawn to, is the randomness of hockey, and the randomness of hockey is, as opposed to football, as opposed to baseball, comes into play with a sort of a voodoo-ish type thing that teams have with their players. Like this guy is sort of magical because he has actually gone out there and performed for us and done things that other players wouldn't be able to do, because we've seen there's this incredible. People don't just look at guys like, oh, we just need a second line left wing. That's not the way it's looked at. It's looked at like he scored a hat trick last year in one game, and he did this, and there's this whole thing of the hat trick sometimes will get a guy signed. It's amazing how you see these things that happen that are kind of random. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a better player because he scored in 5 straight games. He might have just, other players played just as well in those 5 games but didn't score in 5 straight games. He did. So therefore that player has something that we need to hold on to. I think that's part of hockey's love affair with players that you're talking about. I think that they just, and that's why teams get into this.
Well, that's why it's so fascinating here in Detroit, where I live. The Dan Cleary saga, it's just amazing. Yeah. Like Dan
Perfect example.
Cleary is a guy who was one of Babcock's favorite players. And just gave everything he had, and turned himself into a really good player after essentially being looked like he was on a path to being a journeyman, and then found a home in Detroit and was very much appreciated by the fan base. One of the behind-the-scenes leaders of the team, and then had an opportunity to leave, could have gotten more money, and then had what most people see or view as a handshake deal from the Red Wings. And it's so funny how the fan base here is up in arms that
right.
They should give Dan Cleary any kind of money to go, essentially be a minor leaguer. $900,000,
Right.
and even though it's not something that's going to crush the salary cap, they're just, they're just the venom directed at Ken Holland for doing that. Now, if you ask players around the league, their perspective on what the Red Wings do and what they would say is, wow, what a great organization. Handshake deal.
Yes.
They promised them they would take care of them, and they've done that. And the contrast is so incredible on that, because really the fans in Detroit are very upset over that decision to continue to give him money when he can't play in their mind.
You know that is so funny, because I've been on the high horse about Vinny Lecavalier here in Philadelphia. How I think he's being treated poorly, and so are players around the league. Like you talk to other players, and they're like, I can't believe what the Flyers are doing to Vinny. Yep. I can't believe this. It's a horrible. I mean, this guy's a Hall of Famer. He's good. He never complains, but they're screwing him, and they finally get him in the lineup, and they play him on the 4th line on right wing, like the one position he won't play. Like he's a left winger and a center. They're going to put him on right wing. He hates playing right wing. He said he can't play right wing. He just is learning to play left wing out of necessity. So now they put him on the right wing. He doesn't want to be there, and he gets an assist last night on the only goal that they score in the one game he plays. But on the 4th line, playing 7 minutes. But the people around the league players are. I've talked to guys, even on the Flyers team themselves, that are just, they think that this is terrible, that this is a horrible thing and yet there's this real coldness to the team that does remind you of like a football thing, that is like, okay, we're not going to play him no matter what. And I for me, it's a battle between him and Umberger, and I've been saying all along, he's already more productive and was in his 7 minutes than Umberger's been during the whole year. But I just think that aside, you definitely see that in hockey. And I think what we've seen with the Hawks is not just in the Saad trade, but in other trades in years. Every year the Hawks have won the Stanley Cup, they have ruthlessly let people go in people's eyes. Niemi is gone. He wins him a Stanley Cup. He's out of there. Forget about that. Look at all these. Andrew Ladd. Just go down the line. All these players that they have literally decided, like an NFL team, that these are our stars. We're going to build around, and all the other pieces are complementary, and that's how it's going to work.
First of all, I think that the ruthlessness of the NFL has a little bit to do with the fact that they don't have guaranteed contracts. I get that impression. They can.
Oh, it definitely plays into it. Yeah, but there's also a mental mindset.
Yeah, it just goes without saying.
Right, but in regards to Lecavalier, this is the modern day version of what happened to Wade Redden, except that they could have, if the rules were like they were previous to the last collective bargaining agreement, they could have sent him down to Lehigh Valley and buried the $4.5 million. But because they only get cap relief of $950,000, they're stuck.
But that's why it's not the same thing, because Redden was sent down literally to get rid of his contract.
Right.
Lecavalier, they're paying his contract. They're sitting him in the press box and paying his contract. So
if they could do that. What I'm saying is, if they could do that, if they was operating by the previous rules, they would have. Instead,
they would have. Yeah, they would have definitely.
Instead of, you got this festering situation where he's a well-respected player and he's sitting in the press box and he's, like you said, playing fourth line right wing. It's just not a good scenario, but he's almost penalized by the fact that the contract that he has 2 more years after this year, and nobody in the NHL is going to take Vinny Lecavalier at $4.5 million. The only way Philadelphia is ever going to trade him is if they eat some of that salary, and they don't want to do that, so they're stuck.
But this is the first time I've ever felt as if a team had some sort of vindictive aspect to things, and it really weird, because I feel as if Vinny has had some opportunities to be traded and turned down opportunities to be traded because he's got the no trade clause, right? So that, not this year, but last year. So it's almost as if they're saying, you're not going to get traded, we're not going to play you. That's really what it feels like, and it's to the point where. And there's certain people in the Flyers organization that aren't around right now or have left that would never have allowed this to happen before. So I'm watching a whole different, much more ruthless Flyers team come out. That really, this sort of situation would not have occurred before with a player like that. Like, we had players in Philadelphia, like, I don't know, Mike Bullard was here. He's Rob Ramage. Like, players that were here that were toward the end of their careers, that had great careers in other places, right? But came here. And they never were treated like this. It's very interesting, Kev.
I think, again, the 2 ways of looking at this is the Flyers would say, look, this is business, which is what the NFL says. This is just business. But the other way to look at it is, yeah, it's business to them, but it's personal to Vinny Lecavalier, a guy who, Subban got a lot of credit justifiably for the amount of money that he donated. Well, Vinny did that in Tampa, a large amount of money, because he's a good guy. And, was a terrific player. Is he a full-service player? No, never was.
Right.
But, he can help a team. I think he can still play. And it would have been nice if the Flyers would have brought him in and said, hey, how can we work this out, Vinny?
Yeah.
Where do you want to go? What can we do? It to me, it'd be better if they just ate some of the money, and unless they're going to try to tell us that they couldn't have gotten someone to eat half the money. Maybe maybe they haven't been able to.
I think they haven't been able to work it out to the point to a place where he'll go. And there's that, he still has pride. He's not going to go to certain places for him. He just doesn't want to play in certain places. So that there is that on him. You could say he could be playing someplace else right now. I do believe that if he could, but that's another. But the frustrating thing is the Flyers did say that to him. They with the new coach, they said, okay, we're gonna come into camp ready to go, fresh start. Played really well in training camp, was one of the top scorers in the team, and then was scratched in the way opener against Tampa, and played his first minutes the other night. There's a big disjoint there, probably something that I don't know or we don't know going on behind the scenes, because it's just one of those situations that's so odd. you know, and I heard Tim Panaccio talking about it the other day on the radio, and he was saying the same thing. He just no one understands why they're doing this to Vinny. It's completely, it's very un-Flyers like for whatever, you know. Teams have certain reputations, and the Flyers are always one of those teams that free agents wanted to go to because they treated their players well, and this is a situation where they're treating a really respected player by a lot of people poorly. It's interesting to watch. But getting back to our point, I think that the Hawks are isn't it? Are we going to see more teams like this? Because I mean, the Hawks, it's working for them. I mean, this is working.
Well, I don't know. I mean, hockey is different than the NFL. The NFL is not a sport where chemistry. I'm not going to say that it doesn't play any role, but it doesn't play as big a role as it does, in my opinion, in hockey. And so you got to be careful. You can't. The players do respond to loyalty, and players appreciate. I mean, I think that's part of what's going on in Anaheim. As I think the players there, are trying to win for Anaheim. I mean, I can almost make a case that it's possible that the Ducks players are trying too hard. Where the worry over getting Boudreau fired, is playing a role in their losing. So
there's a really interesting last thing on this. Last night, I don't know if you guys heard Ott. Ott was one of the stars of the game for St. Louis, and his post-game comments, which were made, as he's interviewed on the bench, and I'm not a big fan of this when they interview guys on the bench that projected to the entire arena, and the guy's on the bench and he's talking to the whole arena, and he says, well, what do you think about this game, And Ott comes right out and basically said that, Kevin. He's like, that's a team over there that's way better than their record is. He said he came right out and said immediately, that Anaheim team, they're a cup contender. They got a lot of great players. They're holding the stick to. He just went on a whole list of reasons why of giving excuses for Anaheim, and it was the most bizarre thing. Here's a Blues player saying, "Hey, we won this game, but this is that team over there is way better. It's just." And they're trying hard, and it's just not working. And you could see an experienced guy basically going through it.
It's hard with Boudreau too, because I think it's like playing for your dad or your grandpa. I mean, he's just a likable curmudgeon, and I was joking with my sports editor. My sports editor wrote 5 reasons why we shouldn't worry about the Ducks, and one of them is that it isn't Boudreau's issue, that the players do appreciate and respect him. And I joked with my editor. I said, he said, did you think that sounds okay? I said, yeah, because it's USA Today's position that Bruce Boudreau is a good coach. I mean, I pretty much said that. So yes, that is it is our paper stance that what he's doing. I've said before, I just think it's been unlucky. I find it absolutely hypocritical that we constantly talk about that Game 7 is a coin flip, but if a guy loses too many of those coin flips, well, then it's his fault. Game 7s are a coin flip, but if you don't win the coin flips, then suddenly it's your fault. So it's a very difficult situation for Bob Murray. I think part of the issue is that they did make significant changes, and there's guys that are trying to assimilate into the Ducks culture, and I think that's playing a role as well. But I mean, how do you explain that? Perry and Getzlaf, who are the most consistent scorers in the league today, can't find the net. I say this all the time, and people are tired of hearing from me. But they didn't forget how to score since that season. I mean, it just luck still plays a role. Nobody wants to accept that, but there's a randomness of sports that we actually like.
Especially in this sport. I mean, this sport is definitely this sport more than any other. This sport is so built upon luck that builds into momentum, and then luck that builds out of momentum. Yeah, bad luck that turns your momentum. Your momentum is turned on luck so often in this sport. It's kind of crazy.
And it's bad luck that Getzlaf gets appendicitis. I mean, but to your point, Kevin, some of the decisions that Murray made right now, early on, have to be called into question. Especially, I did a podcast yesterday, and one of the person I was interviewing said, the loss of Francois Beauchemin I mean, he played his best hockey. He has played his best hockey throughout his career in Anaheim, and he played very well last year. And their defense, now scoring is the problem there, but Beauchemin is a leader. It was a guy who spent his good years in Anaheim and was a part of their success over a number of years. He goes to Colorado. They bring in Bieksa, and they've used Bieksa they've used him a lot more, too much. I mean, in terms of minutes, they were playing him over 20 minutes. Now they got his minutes down to where it's more likely. But moves like that, letting Beauchemin go, bringing in guys like Santorelli and Chris Stewart, getting rid of the Emerson Edams. I mean, that was a team that developed a lot of their young players, a lot of their depth guys, and now there's more of these mercenaries who have come in. And one-year contract veteran guys, and maybe that has an effect on what's going on there.
But they've got nothing out of Hagelin, which is crazy because Hagelin was such a good player in New York.
I warned you about that. If you remember, what I said was people expected him to be a scorer. He's not a scorer.
No.
He's a speed guy.
Yeah.
And he'll get you 15 to 17, 18 goals, but he's not a goal scorer. To Mike's little speech there, I think the point is interesting, but I've looked at that, and I just don't see that any of those moves, like the guy that they really, Beauchemin I really thought they should have kept him, and they did try to keep him, but the difference between Beauchemin and Bieksa isn't significant enough to cause the problem we have here. Now, I would prefer to have Beauchemin, and everything Mike said is true. He's a great guy. They love him in the room. I think he's much better offensively than Bieksa is, and I would have kept him. But the other guys, I didn't think they gave up a lot to get Hagelin, which should improve their speed. The other guys are just sort of extra guys. It's still their core guys.
Santorelli is leading their team in scoring right now. So I mean that's not for what it's worth.
I'm sure that's played a role in it, the adjustment, but I don't think that's the issue. I just think they're important guys, are snake bitten, and they haven't scored. They've played pretty good defense the last couple of games, and that defensive core is still pretty good. So, I know we didn't get to the scary guys, but I wanted to make a point about it since it's Halloween and it'll be gone now. Eklund was talking about trying to come up with the scariest guys to face. Yeah. When I was doing that, I was struck by something, and it's a point that's worth bringing up. I think, based on when I looked to see who the scariest guys were, that the days when guys were totally petrified in some games are gone. And I say that because it was easier for me to come up with guys that were so hard to play against in the old days and just scary. And it's hard to find guys now. Like the one guy that kept coming up is Zdeno Chara.
Right.
I mean, big. He's 255 pounds. His reach is big. If he falls on you, that's not good.
That's not a good thing.
There's all that. But think about the old days when you faced Gordie Howe or Chris Chelios or Bob Probert or Kocher or Link Getz
I always think of Pronger,
Ty Domi. I mean, dirty, tough, nasty players. We're just short of those guys now.
Yeah, they are, and they're either suspended for half a year or they're gone. But
I mean, Rafi Torres, if he was there, would make the list.
Yeah, but you're right. No, I totally agree, and I mean, I still think of. Scariest all can be interpreted in so many different ways. Like when you talked about Mario Lemieux on a breakaway, and you said, I'm more afraid of Mario Lemieux on a breakaway than Ovechkin. Yeah, I actually agree with that 100%.
Actually,
I was more afraid of Mario Lemieux than Wayne Gretzky, for sure. I remember that in that era, when Mario got the puck, it was a goal. But it's the same with Tarasenko right now. So is Tarasenko is definitely frightening. I think it's just a different kind of intimidation that we look at now.
Actually, I saw a picture of Mike Ricci when he was with the Colorado Avalanche. That was pretty scary.
No, he definitely.
Mike liked to part his teeth in the middle.
We were joking about Mike Ricci because it's funny you brought that up because he did definitely go into zombie Mike Ricci as time went on. But
but he was the last guy that, and I always bring this to people. He, when he was coming up in junior ranks, he was. Big. I mean, they thought he was going to be like a tremendous player, a scorer, and everything else.
Wasn't a bad-looking character either. Like he was a half decent looking guy. I remember. I will never forget him on the cover of the Hockey News. Remember this? Yeah. Like he was the next big thing, and he.
Yeah, I mean, like Tavares, he was going to be Tavares or Stamkos or one of those type guys.
Yeah.
He's the last guy that I can remember. I mean, obviously Diggs in a class by himself, but that really didn't turn out to be the player they thought he did. However, he turned out to be a really, really, really valuable role player.
Right. Oh yeah, he turned out to be.
He was a really good hockey player. He just wasn't the offensive player that they thought he was going to be.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I think the guy who compares to him now in a different way, but he's turned into a very effective role player after being a top 5 pick, is Benoit Pouliot. I mean, he was supposed to be something with Minnesota. Then he gets traded. He goes to the Rangers. He's part of that Cup team. Yeah. Now he's playing with McDavid and Yakupov, and he's contributing. So he didn't turn out to be the guy that everybody thought he was going to be, but he's still doing something that's valuable.
Yeah, I'm buying that.
To me, he kind of, and then it kind of reminds me of Sean Couturier. And it's like they feel like similar players to me. They rate Ricci because when I think of Ricci as a Flyer, I definitely think of him as one of them. I think of him and Ron Sutter as these players who were defensive minded, like had good. And there's so few of those players now. You can name so few really good defensive centers in this league. It's astonishing to me that's a lost art. But there were a lot of them back then.
I almost feel though like Jaromir Jagr, I remember reading him, comparing him to Ron Francis, and then I remember there was a lot of discussion about how advanced he was as a defensive forward in his rookie season, and like that was on like a Tuesday, and like Wednesday he stopped, concentrating on offense. Like
right.
It was. It's like the tilapia controversy that I always talk about. Nobody eats tilapia, and then one day on a Tuesday, suddenly it was everywhere. And that's how I feel about Couturier. That everybody thought of him, oh wow, he's going to be a really good player, a good two-way center, and then all of a sudden everybody started talking about defense, and then suddenly offense was off the table.
He is the perfect example. I love him, Kevin, on because we just really go off on tangents. This has been a tangent show, which is awesome. I love tangent shows. But Couturier is the perfect example of my theory in hockey that every player is given a sentence, like one sentence, of that describes them when they first come in the league, and they have to break that sentence is really difficult, incredibly difficult. And Couturier, I remember somebody comparing him to Jordan Staal, like really early on. And someone said, he's just like Jordan, and that, for some reason, that stuck as he's going to be Jordan Staal, who is a defensive center who can move, and who can kill penalties, and that's that. And so they decided that was. But
the worst thing that happened to Couturier was the fact that he shut down Malkin in that playoff series. That he got underneath the skin of Malkin, and I think it was as an 18-year-old. So immediately everybody's saying, okay, he's going to be that shutdown center that every successful Stanley Cup winning team needs.
Well, that's true. And the thing is, his dad was a coach, okay, and that was also a big thing that was made up. That's the other sentence. Couturier is so smart because his dad was a coach. And he doesn't make any mistakes. He knows how to play. He knew how to play when he was 18. That's why they kept him here longer, right? And part of that came along with that too. And then this year, Hackstall's made an effort to he made Couturier the second line center when the season began. They're going to turn him into a scorer, and it just hasn't happened. And it's because Couturier does still tend towards defense. If you were playing a youth hockey, if this was a youth hockey team, you would be going up to Couturier's parents and saying, "You sure he doesn't want to play defense?" Because that's really where he is. He just, no matter what you do, Couturier can't get that out of his system. He's not going to be the guy who takes the extra second in the zone. He's just not going to do it. And therefore he's not going to be that. But he's going to be a very effective player, like Ricci was. He's going to be he's a very effective player, and he's tough nosed, and he is old school hockey. Like he's a definite old school hockey player. Without the teeth and everything. Couturier fits that mold perfectly. But it's funny. I mean, but he's been targeted with that for a long time.
We're gonna get out the door here, but I wanted to bring up, because I haven't been on in a while, and I don't know whether you saw it, but we have talked in the past about a comparison for Austin Matthews.
Right.
I exchanged emails with Mark Crawford recently, and he gave me just what I think is just a great comparison. He said he reminds him a lot of Anze Kopitar, but with a mixture of Jean Beliveau.
Wow.
So Anze Kopitar and Jean Beliveau.
Wow.
And he also told me that he's never had a player, and Mark Crawford, for those who have forgotten, coached 15 years in the NHL.
Yeah.
Who could carry the puck with the speed through the neutral zone. That
coached some pretty good players.
Yeah, and the other comparison that I've gotten from scouts is Mike Modano, because of the speed and the and so forth. And the thought that originally that some people had said to me, well, maybe he could end up on the wing. Everybody says there's no possible way he'll be a center.
Is this a good experiment for him, you think? Going to Switzerland?
Yeah. Oh, well, some people still complain about it, that this is a bad precedent, but I think he is such a unique case because, he just missed qualifying for the draft before. And the fact that he's gone over there and not just been a good player, but among the top players in the league. I mean, when I wrote the story, he was leading the Swiss league in goals, which was this was a week ago or 10 days ago.
He's doing the one thing that McDavid and Eichel couldn't ever prove, that they could play with men, right? That's the thing. He goes over there and he's proven that he can play with men.
Yeah, and I know Pat Brisson, who is his agent, a guy that I really like and enjoy, and Pat played junior hockey, I believe, in the Quebec League, and was a player of note and certainly understands the game. He said that the tradition in the Swiss league, for those who don't know, is that the top scorer on each team wears the gold helmet and wears a jersey that says leading scorer. So you designate them so that all the fans know. It's a great tradition. It's just part of the tradition of Swiss hockey. And he said to Austin, by the end of the year, you'll be wearing that gold helmet and that jersey. And he goes, it only took him a month. Within a month, he was wearing the gold helmet. So
wow.
I talked to Austin's dad, and it was just a tremendous interview. And I can understand now why this kid has the poise on the ice, because I've met a lot of hockey parents, and it's really amazing to me that the last two American stars, because I interviewed Jack Eichel's dad as well, neither one of them chased it. And by that I meant, these are not hockey dads. Austin Matthews, they didn't move the family away to find better competition. He stayed in Arizona. He did his thing there. When it was time for him to leave, he left. And I can just see from talking to his dad that sort of parenting that he got from his dad and his mom, who, by the way, was born in Mexico.
Wow.
It's funny. He's got grandparents who still live in Mexico who really know nothing about hockey, but do follow him, through the internet and television and stuff. So anyway, I could just sense from talking to his dad, I understand why he has such poise on the ice, because they're not like a family that sat down when Austin Matthews was 12 and said, well, this is what we need to do in order to make
great.
A great player. So
that's great to hear. Boy, we just need to rig it so he plays for the Arizona Coyotes. It just has to be.
Yeah.
If there only there was a way, honestly, if all just take the Edmonton Ping Pong Wells out of there somehow.
They're doing pretty good with Max Domi and with Anthony Duclair.
No, Max Domi's a hell of a player, but and Duclair too. But this would really, if he got there, the Coyotes would be set. I mean, that would set them up. It would just save a franchise, in my opinion. And that franchise isn't going to be, the big news out of there is that they're going to move into town, at some point here. They're building a stadium. They're trying to build a stadium for the Suns and the Coyotes.
Yeah. That's another pronouncement. I haven't been on it so long that I can tell you, I used to tell people all the time, Winnipeg is, when everybody was complaining that the league didn't I said Winnipeg will get a team, but they'll get it when the NHL wants to go there. And the same thing, I say that about Quebec. Even if they weren't going to get the expansion team now, which I think they will, but if they weren't, they were going to get a team. It's just a matter of when. Well, I can tell you, without a doubt, the Coyotes are staying in Arizona. I have no doubt from talking to people there that there is no plans to take that team anywhere. They're staying in Arizona, and just as you alluded to, I think they have other options. They'll a downtown arena or maybe arena in Scottsdale. I think Glendale, the city officials, have just totally screwed themselves.
Yeah.
What the position they've put the Coyotes in, and now they're going to end up with an arena that's going to be difficult to fill. I pity what's going to happen to that little shopping area around there. So
Yeah, well, the people that's for sure. It's going to be a tough sell for sure.
One,
all right, well, that's all the time we have. Mike?
One last thing, just how appropriate. Phil Kessel comes back to Toronto with the Pittsburgh Penguins on Halloween night. Perfect.
Excellent.
yeah.
All right, well, that's something to look forward to. It'll be a fun weekend of games ahead, for sure. Remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We didn't get to the box of cards today, but I had a good one too. But we'll talk later. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.